The Brutally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Starving Artist Brewing. Starving Artist Brewing may be a small speck on Michigan's beer map, but they say big things come in small packages. A brewery who really puts their money where their mouth is, supporting underground artists far and wide. Making delicious beers with the simple belief that you should judge beer, not people. Brutally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BRUTALLY and get 10% off your total purchase order. Now on to the show.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard. And you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give
up. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Brutally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is Jake Smelley, drummer for Gideon, and a few other bands as well. This was a really fun chat. This chat had been scheduled a few different times over the course of the new record dropping. We were supposed to do a chat while the band was on tour, but that kind of proved to be a little bit difficult. Then we were supposed to do a chat initially with their guitar player, and then it was like right before we got ready to do this, it ended up being with Jake. And, you know, a lot of times I say that, you know, you get the people or things happen in your life when they're kind of supposed to. And what's really interesting is I feel like this chat kind of is very much on brand with that sentiment, in the fact that, you know, obviously having very little time to know that I was talking with Jake, you know, I couldn't have prepped for a conversation if I were to sit there and literally write out all the questions ahead of time and try to formulate an interview of sorts. Which is why I'm really glad that I'm able to just have a conversation with people and that I don't really prepare anything. And it's one of those things where, interestingly, we were talking about Taylor Hawkins of Foo Fighters and just the synchronicity of life, of just us kind of mutually bonding over our love of Taylor and what the Foo Fighters mean and what's, you know, bands and music means to us, and just kind of going down the path of, you know, talking about therapy and all these other things. And it just was something that, you know, as I said in the episode, obviously with Chris from Bury Tomorrow, that I did literally 5-10 minutes before, like talking with Chris, going into this one with Jake, that it was a thing where I just kind of needed these. I needed these two conversations. I needed these two episodes to happen. You know, it kind of really reinvigorated in me why I love doing this podcast. And this one, not saying that there was anything wrong with the one with Chris, because I feel like that episode was really good. And a lot of what we talked about off mic, off record, really kind of solidified that as well, of just kind of bonding and kind of starting a new friendship of sorts. And this one was just getting right into it right away. And is one of those things where, you know, I kind of talked about and have said to some friends, like, I found the why again, why I love doing this show and the purpose of why I love doing this. And it honestly is, it was this conversation that I was just like, fuck, this is it. This is why I love doing this. And I'm so fucking stoked to bring this episode to you, to bring this conversation to you. And I'm excited as shit to get to hang out with Jake after the fact, you know, the next time like they roll through town, but I'm sure we're going to be in contact with one another before that. And it's just kind of the magic of this. And sometimes, you know, we talk, or at least I do, I should say, that we talk about how when you get older, it's hard to find new friends, because it's not like it was when you were a kid where you're just like, oh, you have a backpack that has Ninja Turtles on it, and I love Ninja Turtles, so we should be best friends. It's not as simple as that anymore, and you're a lot more guarded, and it's more complicated. And to do this and have real honest conversations with people who are willing to open up and be vulnerable and honest for everyone, whoever it is, to listen to, really means a lot to me. And it's one of those things that I don't take for granted. And honestly, like when I say it's what I need, that this show, beyond anything else, whether anyone listens to this, if no one listened to this, this has kind of become a form of therapy for me. Literally in the sense, talking about what I went through, going to therapy, hearing what other people have gone through and sometimes their struggles and so forth. And I think humanizing life that we all encounter, I think, and I've said it, I know countless times on this, but it just rings true with an episode like this, in a conversation like this, that it's so obvious sometimes how much we are so similar as people, but I think we're afraid to admit the things that we're going through. And it's in those things that we start finding that we're so much more similar than we're not. And it makes me, at the very least, feel not alone. Not alone with my thoughts, not alone with how I feel, not alone with struggles that I may be going through. And at the end of the day, like, it's magical, and I really do appreciate it. So without further ado, this is my conversation with Jake. Let's get into it, and I'll talk to you on the other side of it. So I learned, I'm sure you've seen the viral videos of the dude that wears like the white, like the full white outfit, like the short shorts, and he's got like just a giant ass.
Dude,
have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen that. Who is
Okay. I don't know, but I've seen videos that he's done, but apparently he lives here in Grand Rapids where I live. So that was interesting. And then it was just basically a little puff piece about how, he's one of the bigger stars on TikTok and blah, blah, blah. And he lives here and does all of his like stuff around here instead of moving out to LA where it'd probably be easier. Secondly, I heard that, I guess the Foo Fighters are close to announcing their drummers to replace Taylor Hawkins. So I guess they are possibly, going to have two.
I hope one of them is Taylor's son.
Yeah. There's been, obviously after the tribute shows that went around, I think that was kind of the consensus. A lot of people wanted, I'm totally blanking on that kid's name too. But obviously a lot of people wanted him to tour with the band in some capacity. And I feel like the gist was that everyone was a little bit afraid of that he just wasn't going to be not touring ready, I don't want to say, but just that a kid that age just can't tour like they probably would.
I get what you're saying, yeah. But also I've listened to Dave Grohl's book, and he talks a lot about how a lot of them bring family on the road, and like how they have like a family room, like a green room specifically for families. So I don't know how that works. But the kid, he's, and he brought me to tears at when they did the Wembley show. I think it was at the Wembley. That's, I don't know. He's killer though. I hope that if not now, in due time, I hope he fills his shoes, because that would, I don't know, that would make so much sense to me.
I feel like if I had to guess and I was a betting man, my money would be on Josh Freese to take over most of the touring capacity for them.
I'm sure they'll land on whoever makes the most sense to them, but it's going to be hard to find anybody that plays like Taylor and had the heart Taylor had. But we'll see what they do, man. I'm hoping to catch them this summer, so I'll see whoever it is this summer. I think it's I'm trying to remember what festival it was. I want to say it was Sonic Temple, I believe. It's one of those.
Yeah, Sonic Temple was where I actually got to see the band for the first time. And, it was kind of in a day and age where everyone kind of makes tragedies about themselves somehow. Like they always try to find a way to like be like, oh, well, you know, kind of just for like likes or shares or clicks or whatever. It was one of those that for the longest time, like I've been a Foo Fighters fan for pretty much since The Color and the Shape. I wasn't really super big on the first record initially, but it was a thing where I'd always wanted to see the band, and they kind of existed and toured when I couldn't afford to go to like many arena shows and stuff like that.
Right.
And they didn't really play B markets very often either, and so it just was a lot harder to see them. And so I got approved for Sonic Temple, and it was like the first festival I ever got approved for as media for the podcast. And they were headlining. And the quick backstory is there was a person that I knew locally here in Michigan that kind of did like still owns a recording studio that had like people come through of name and record, and then also did a yearly festival around this area. And so I wanted to have him on the podcast when I started it, just because it's like, I used to book shows, and the idea of trying to put on a yearly festival seemed very hard, and I think would be interesting to talk about, of like, we almost got these bands or this happened, and the growth of the festival from being a DIY thing to something a lot bigger where you're growing your brand and so forth. And just kind of being a business minded person in the music industry and in different facets. And I remember they came back to me and they're like, well, what's your reach? What's your, all this kind of dumb shit. And I was just like, didn't really expect that to be the answer I got. So then that kind of became the fuel. Like whenever I got someone, it was like, oh, well, am I fucking big enough now? Like, what's my reach now? Like, just shit like that, like internally. And I remember with my media pass, I took in the Foo Fighters set pretty much everywhere I could across that whole stadium. And my wife took a photo of me because I had bought a Foo Fighters hoodie because it started to get cold and I didn't pack any. And so from the back upper level of the stadium, I had my Foo Fighters hoodie up watching the band. And then she had tagged me in a Facebook post. It's like, are you big enough now? And so like the Foo Fighters and that moment will be kind of forever just etched into the history of this podcast, and really the podcast being something akin to any band really. But like I started something on my own, and I just the DIY work ethic that I had and all the work and the hours that I put into it to be accepted on this bigger level, and this opportunity that I was given, and to finally see a bucket list band that I've always wanted to see, just this full circle moment. And so when Taylor obviously passed, it was one of those things where that was the first thought I had, was just, him and the band being attached to like one of my most proud moments of something I've done on my own, and it'll forever be tied to them.
No, I feel you. I'll never forget what it was whenever I got the news, and it was right before we went on stage. But that band also, like, I've never seen them live, but they have a lot to do with me even like being a drummer. Whenever I discovered drums at around 15, I was playing along to anything that I could get my hands on, and not even on drums. It was just on textbooks from school because I didn't have a drum set, but I had a pair of drumsticks that my sister gave me when I was younger, and I would listen to Foo Fighters until like I just had holes in all of my textbooks just from drumming along and trying to like learn the parts and everything. And so they hold like them, and I mean Dave Grohl and Taylor Hawkins, like that duo, man, is just like will never not blow my mind. Because they're both top drummers for me. Like they're both reasons why I play drums. So we were actually in Colorado Springs, and I found out right before we went on stage, and it was so hard. Like I don't know, I just remember beating the hell out of my drums that night, and I don't know, going through like old pictures of him and everything. The guy was always smiling, and it made me realize, like, wow, like I take so much of this for granted. Like, there's so many nights where either the music, like, it's easy when you're playing heavy music to just be like, you know, aggressive the whole time, or like, just think about hitting the piss out of your drums, you know. And it made me stop and think about, like, I need to, even in the middle of the set, like, I need to be looking around and like smiling more, and like, and really taking in the moment. So yeah, he's inspired me in a lot of ways. Him and Dave Grohl. His Dave Grohl's book really, it really blew my mind. The Storyteller book.
Yeah, I read it.
You read it already?
Mm-hmm.
Man, and to see like the similarities of how he came up, like, in the punk rock world and everything, and a lot of the venues he's naming are like places like we've played and stuff. And I don't know, it inspired me so much, man. It really did.
It's without kind of getting too trippy, it's weird sometimes when I watch like these documentaries, or I feel this connection to these players that inspire me, you know, listening to their music, or are such a sonic, you know, background to what I'm doing, a soundtrack essentially to my life at different points. And I remember like reading Randy Blythe's book years ago when that first came out. And I'm someone who, when I read very quickly. And like a lot of things, I try to take my time with it because it's too easy to just fucking blow through something. And yeah, like, and that's not how I read. I do have a really good retention for reading and information, but it was a thing where I have to condition myself because I know I'll just be excited about something and just blow through it, where it's like, yeah, I'm never going to probably read this again because I'll remember it and I have a good memory of it. So it's like, I don't just spend $40 on a book just to like fucking go through it super quick. But what was weird is with like the Randy book, I remember holding off for a little bit and not reading it. And then I just happened to pick up, and like the first page I was reading was a memory about Dimebag. And the fucked up part about it was it was the anniversary of Dimebag passing away the day I was reading that part. And so like there's moments like that in my life where just like odd coincidences happen. And so with the Dave Grohl book, it was very similar. I was kind of pacing myself reading it. Like I would have a beer or a glass of wine or something, and I would allot myself maybe 20, 30 minutes to just read. And then I'd put it down so I could savor it for a while. And I remember talking to Chris from Ghost Inside, because it was when the book had just come out, and he was like, and I think it was right around the time of Taylor maybe passing. Actually, it was. And he was like, oh man, that last part of the book. And I was like, I haven't finished it yet. And so he was like, oh, so I finished the book, and I think it was right around the time of like the Wembley show. And so like, again, just like perfect timing of like reading that and just feeling very sad and melancholy about like the loss of this person, and seeing that and just seeing, you know, how his music had touched so many people. It kind of puts it all in perspective at times of like, and I'm preaching to the choir on this, but it's like, it's why you go away from home. It's why you miss anniversaries and birthdays and all these things, because you're serving a larger purpose to others that maybe need you.
Right.
And when you see something like that, it just kind of really kind of makes you realize like why any of us do anything that we're passionate about, because there's kind of you're doing it for kind of the greater good, for lack of a better term. Like, I feel like at times like it's kind of stupid to be like, oh, this podcast, I know there are people who listen to it, but it's like there are times I'll get messages from people or texts from friends even who are like, you know, I was having a real bad day today, and, you know, I was whatever, and you were talking about therapy with somebody, and you articulated all these things that make me feel how I feel, but you were able to say it. And it makes me realize that I'm not alone, and that I have struggles, and that we all have struggles, and so forth. And it's moments like that where I'm like, man, days that I don't maybe want to do this, or I want to put in the time editing the podcast or putting the show together or whatever, the countless emails back and forth, it makes it worth it when when those things happen.
Right, because it's always in the back of your head, like, what we do is for a greater good, but it's not in the back, or it's not on the forefront of my mind every single day. And so every time like I'm reminded of that, it's always like a good reset, you know what I mean? And knowing that like any pain that comes from anything in my life, it can be used to help somebody get through whatever they're going through. And I try to remind myself of that a lot. Um, and dude, you got me stuck on something real quick, so I just want to like point this out. But that book, Storyteller, he talks a lot about his. There's not one moment in that book where he says, "I made it," and then it's like over. Like there's so many moments in that book, from like small moments to huge moments where he stops and he says, I made it. Like we made it, you know." And that's like that was a huge takeaway for me, and something I think I'll carry the rest of my life is not looking or waiting on one moment specifically to be like the end all be all, or like the one moment I'm waiting for it to be like, okay, like I did this in my life and I'm ready to move on. It's like a because I never starting this, I never really had a bucket list. Like I hear people like you mention bucket lists all the time and everything. What's your bucket list? Venue and things like that. I had like a very small, humble list of things I wanted to do when I was younger. And it seems like the older I get, it's just like a lot of those moments where it's like, holy shit, like I made it, I did this. And then it just keeps like the further you walk along, but it doesn't come without its trials, you know what I mean? And speaking of therapy, like, that's something that, dude, I started peeling back a lot of layers and stuff, from like my past and things that have really held me back in life. Is I mean, being creative is one way to get through a lot of that stuff, but when you realize like what's been, I don't know, when you start peeling back that layer, it can get really heavy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
uh, so yeah, it's really cool what you do, man. It's, just having conversations, whether you're talking to somebody or somebody's listening to you talk to somebody, it can help them realize things about, their life and how to get through things, so it's really cool what you do.
First of all, thank you for the kind words. That's in therapy. That's something, and coincidentally, I just got done doing a chat with Chris from Barry Tomorrow, and it was something we kind of touched on. Is both of I saw a lot of me in him, where I
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, are you an empathic person?" And he's like, "Yes, very much so." And then even when I'd give him compliments about something, he'd be like, "Well, I don't really know if it's this or if it's that," and he'd kind of deflect. And then I kind of broke it down for a minute, and I was like, it's funny. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at how much I hear of myself, and probably what my therapist heard when I was saying these same things when we broke down that I had imposter syndrome. And it's something I've kind of always, I don't want to say suffered, because it kind of, I think, lessens other things that are more severe, but it's something that, I think a lot of us sometimes are so aware of the perception of our words, and how when you say something that it could come across as braggy or like very
Right.
grandiose of yourself.
You don't
And
want to
so
see
we,
ego.
yeah. And so a lot of times, even when you get a compliment and you're trying to like deflect, like, don't put all the praise on me, it could go here, 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 and here, and it's all these other things. I think it's hard, because then the adverse starts happening too, where it's like, well, you're a fucking dick and you're not even taking my praise. You're it can go that way. And so I've kind of tried to be more present, that when someone compliments me, of my first instinct is to kind of back away from it and then give it to where else it should be. But also now kind of trying to get out of my comfort zone of being like, well, thank you, and just kind of
That's so
accepting it.
hard to do, man. It's so hard for me. Our guitar player Tyler, actually, he set me down a few years ago. This is before I even started therapy. But he set me down like, this was, like I said, years ago. But he was like, man, when somebody comes up to you and says like, you killed it tonight, or you did a good job or whatever, he said, just don't, instead of like saying like pointing out all the flaws in what you did, because that is my go-to. Like whenever somebody wants to say good job or something like that, I immediately start thinking about what I could have done better. And I start pointing those things out. And he was just like, man, just like sometimes it's okay just to say thank you. So like I'm trying to practice that myself. And it's hard because like even right now talking about this, like I feel like the words coming out of my mouth, like I sound like an egotistical jerk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's really it's a uphill battle whenever you really just I don't know, you don't feel like it's one thing to aspire to be the best, um but you never want to come across as like I don't know, you're like God's gift to like humanity, and that like you have it all figured out, and that you can't do anything wrong, like cuz dude, I don't know, I'm you know what I'm trying to say? Like
Yeah.
I don't, and I can't stand talking to those people either. That it's like all they can do is uh is talk about how sick they are. It's like I don't know. It's just not very pleasant whenever somebody can't. Uh, I don't know. It's much chiller just talking to somebody that's like humble and feels like they're in the process of figuring things out too. I think that it brings that human side out, and it's easier to talk to those people. You know what I mean?
Well, I think a lot of what it is, given the fact that, so it's kind of twofold. I think part of it for me is I've always loved talking. I mean, anyone that knows me and has known me a long time, I have no problems talking to anyone, anywhere about anything. I always joke I have like such a wide array of useless knowledge
Mm.
on so many things that it allows me to talk about sports, music, not so much cars, but I'll listen to someone talk about cars and then I'll have questions, and that will allow me to keep the conversation going. But I
That's something
think,
to talk about with cars next. You know?
yeah, but I think it's one of those things to me that I'm just curious by nature. I love learning. I love talking to people. I love gaining different experiences beyond my own. But interestingly, as I talk to a lot of people, even before even doing this podcast, that we're a lot more similar than I think a lot of people think we are with others. And I think once you kind of start breaking that down and having honest communication with people, that's where a lot of you'll find that. But I think a lot of people, in the world we live in where communication is done, on a device where you're connected to people at all times, the actual face-to-face communication doesn't exist because, we, cliche as it is, we've heard so many people talk about how people curate their lives on social media to be the best of whatever everything is. I think inversely, I think you can apply that to texting as well. You can perfectly curate your text and replies because most people, I would say, aren't super stream of conscious and just texting whatever. You can go back, edit something because you're looking at it, edit out the word you don't like or the phrase, and then kind of go back through and do it. And I think it just has created a world where we don't exist in real time
Mm.
to communicate. But secondly, I think it's also a lot of people don't want to converse with one another. They're waiting for their turn to talk. And that's not communicating. That's not.
I get that. I hope that this doesn't cut out when I come in here. I have to grab a charger real fast. I'm sure you're thinking, oh, this guy doesn't. I'm not prepared at all. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Um, but no, I totally get that. It's for it to be a conversation, you got to be listening as well. You know what I mean?
I think it's been one of the things doing this podcast, going on almost 7 years and almost 400 episodes now, that it's funny when I read comments, which, I mean, I have so many friends that are in the industry that are like, don't ever fucking read comments, but I also see them. I also see them reading comments too. So it's a thing it's like picking the wound. You can't help but do it, and it's bad. But there are times where like I've read comments and people are like, dude, you need to like shut the fuck up, like let the other person talk. And it's like, if I were doing an interview, 100%. But I'm not doing an interview where it's like, here's my like 7 questions I have for you. This is an actual conversation between 2 people. There are going to be times where I may talk more than you, but then adversely, you may talk longer than me. And that's just how it goes. That's how a conversation naturally happens.
Right. No, it's dude, the comment thing is so it's so funny. Like I know you're not. I don't know. I go against what people tell me as well, and read through that stuff, and it's so. It used to really break me down, man, because I was like, man, we just can't win, and I think that especially like on the. For whatever reason, Facebook's always like the worst, like on our band page. But it's now that maybe it comes with age. I don't know what it is, but I just think it's hilarious. You know what I mean? When people like take their time to, I don't know, to try to make you writing music and even with podcasts, I'm sure like it's because basically, essentially, we're doing the same thing. It's like we put our lives out there. For people to either tell us one of 2 things, it's good or it's bad, and I just find that so so interesting sometimes when people go out of your way just to make sure that they hate it. But I watched something this morning that actually talked about art and how there should be more room for artists to fail more. There should be more room for people to take chances with their art, to repeat their art, to basically do with their art whatever they want to. But the way that we're set up nowadays, there's less room for failure because you're on such a pedestal and everybody's basically waiting for it to either they're waiting for exactly what they want out of your art. So if it's not, spot on with what they envision, then they look at it as bad. But art should be, that person just expressing themselves through whatever means that is,
I'm going to get the name of this book wrong because it's a lengthy book title. I'm Googling it real quick to make sure I can say it to you. Okay. So it's funny you kind of bring this up because I had read a book recently because I decided to get a library card and just go instead of spending a bunch of money on books and then blowing through them and then never reading them again. I was like, well, I'll just go for free and go read stuff. And so one that I had found was called, I feel like I got a burp coming. Once Upon a Time in Shaolin, The Untold Story of Wu Tang Clan's $1 Million Secret Album, The Devaluation of Music, and America's New Public Enemy #1. So basically the dude who wrote this was involved in the process of Wu Tang making that secret record that they sold to Martin Shkreli, the pharma dude. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this doesn't really spoil anything. So if you end up reading it, this will probably entice you to want to read it. But it was talking RZA and the guy who he ended up producing the album with, who was like a longtime fan that then befriended the RZA and then was like, oh, we should, make a throwback record. And RZA's like, I can't, because like I'm not that guy anymore. I'm not the same person that wrote and produced, Enter the 36 Chambers, like, or even Forever. Like, I'm not that guy. I can tell you stories and, maybe you're able to kind of extrapolate that sound and make it as close to authentic as possible because you know me and you know us and you're a fan. but they were having a conversation about what's the difference between, you know, some of these paintings that sell for millions and millions of dollars versus, or authors or anybody, what's the difference between them and why are they able to sell things at such a premium, but music is looked at as just a useless commodity, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of broke it down to its simplest form of, you know, those pieces of art, you know, that are in galleries and so forth, there's only one of them, you know, one actual print of that. Like the painting exists as a one of one. There are reprints that are sold at obviously a lesser amount, but the one exists because it's a one of one. And so that then made them start looking at music like, what if we did the same thing to music? What if we made one copy of an album? Would it be looked at in the same capacity? Because we're trying to change the narrative of music as art versus its contemporaries. And so that's why they started going out and making this copy, or this one album. And they talk about the journey along the way of them making the album, and how are they going to get it out? How do you distribute an album, and who owns the rights, and how do you, like, all these things that kind of buck the traditional main, like, ways that mainstream music is consumed as far as digital rights, you know, how do you, like, all these other things. And one of the interesting things that they kind of talked about in the process as well is, you know, they put out some music and they sold it, I think, at like a song or two. And they sold it at like one at like $5, one at like 25 or 50, and then one at 100. And they go, within the first like couple of days of us doing that, the $5 songs leaked immediately. But interestingly, as of the time of the writing, the other songs at a more expensive tier never got leaked. So therefore, it even kind of set the precedence that when people pay a premium amount for something, they don't want to devalue it themselves and give it away for free because they spent their own money on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really interesting to think about this and think about how, because I remember when album was being shopped and basically it was being talked about, everyone's like, what the fuck? Like, how come we're not going to get to hear it and all this kind of stuff? And it's like, I mean, we're making it to kind of make a statement. We'll put out another record that's for everybody, but it's interesting to kind of think about it, how people were bitching that they didn't have access to something because they didn't have the funds. And it's like, well, you have to realize that this costs us money too. We put our lives on hold. You know, we're not making money making this for you just to turn around and get it for free on streaming. Like, there has to be a big, like, seismic shift in the industry, and we're kind of trying to make a bigger point, and hopefully you understand it. But it's like they received huge backlash because of what they were doing, not only from the industry but their fans. And it was really interesting to kind of think about that as a whole. Like, what do we do? How do we add value to what we do? And how do we not devalue ourselves in the process?
Wow. That'll make you sit back and think about how you're doing things, man. Because it's similar to, like, if, think of like a famous painting. Like, it wouldn't be I don't know. Would it be as famous if there were just like a million prints sold of this thing, you know what I mean? And just distributed out for, $10 a pop. Would the original be hanging in some museum somewhere, you know?
I don't know.
That's a beautiful way. I've never heard anybody put it that way. What is the name of this book?
I think I closed the browser, but I can pull it up. Or no, here it is. So it's called Once Upon a Time in Shaolin, The Untold Story of the Wu Tang Clan's $1 million secret album, The De-Evaluation of Music, and America's New Public Enemy.
That's really cool. Music is, I believe it's art. But for some, I know that the time it takes to make a record, I know the time, and I know it's different for everybody. Some people sit around with, just sheets of music waiting to put it out at any point or sell to somebody else, you know. But that's definitely not the case for our band. And whenever we go to release an album, there's a lot of not only the time taken to go, you know, record it and write it, but even the things like you have to feel in order to write that album. Because it's, I think our jobs as musicians, I believe it's to make somebody feel something. And in order to, I mean, sure, you have good storytellers out there, but I think the best stories are the ones that are personal, um, and have like pure emotion behind it. And so I don't know, a lot of records you hear, it's like actually things that these people are feeling, and then they have to find a way to artistically put it out there. And yeah, for it just to be, you know, sent out for free. I mean, I'm thankful uh, that anything I've ever done has been heard on any kind of level, and um, so I don't want to sound ungrateful, but it is wild whenever you reach the age of adulthood and you're like, okay, like this is what I do with my life. This is who I am. This is what I feel like I'm meant to be, and there's no slowing down at this point. If I want it to be my career, then I have to actually, like, you know, hit the gas a little bit. I can't, you know, treat this like it's a hobby. Um, I think that it makes you look at things a little differently as far as like what your songs are worth and what you're worth as an artist. And it's hard to put a price on something like that. Um, and it's a very confusing thing that you and I do, you know. Because we're not going in and clocking in somewhere and you know, getting compensated for it. It's what people feel the need to, what they think we're worth, you know. Um, it's a very interesting. It's so strange.
Two things, as you were just kind of saying that, I guess I've never really thought about it from this perspective. We're almost kind of in, I guess, like a stock market of sorts, where it's like your stock can rise and plummet, and it's not really determined by you. It's determined by so many extenuating outside factors. Secondly, what I think is interesting, and I had a conversation probably about a year ago with Dennis DeYoung, formerly of Styx, on this show.
Oh, that's dope.
And I remember at one point he was kind of, you know, we were talking about his last record, like his last recorded record that he said he was ever going to do. And, you know, he's talking about like diminished returns, basically. Like everyone just wants to hear the hits already. Like, why does anyone want to hear anything new from me? So I wanted to at least do something and blah, 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 blah. And he kind of threw it at me and was like, you know, it's your generation that's kind of, you know, it wants everything now, and you guys, you know, will get a record and then it's forgotten about tomorrow and then it's on to the next thing. And I pushed back and I was like, physical album sales are stronger now than they ever have been. And I go, if anything, I feel like the music industry has gone back to what it was when your generation was kids back in the 50s and 60s, and it was about a single. Just push one song over and over and over, and that one song would get you until the next one, until the next one. And I go, and then I would challenge it to more of like the 80s and early 90s, where artists were putting out albums and half-assing it, where it'd be front-loaded with 3 or 4 big singles that could carry the record, and then you'd put out shit that you could clearly tell was just filler.
Yeah.
And I think people were tired of spending $25 when CDs were like expensive as shit, and were bummed out that they bought album after album that just wasn't up to par and were sold on the singles. So then you have iTunes coming around, where it's like, it kind of, I think, kept artists and the consumers honest with each other. Oh, these 4 songs are the only good ones? Well, I'm only buying them. 99 cents a piece. I'm going to a la carte what I want.
Oh my God.
And I think it becomes this thing where we're starting to see, and the flip side of it too is, I think from a music industry perspective, it's kind of fucked up that a label will come to you going, we want 42 minutes of either 42 minutes and or this amount of songs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because how can you know that you are going to be inspired to write 42 minutes and 10 songs worth that are going to be up to the standard that you want consistently? I think at some point there becomes compromise where it's like, this is the album as I would see it, which would probably be 6 songs. I feel really great about these 6, but we need 2 more because contractually that's what we said we'd do. And I feel like it gets kind of hard where you're, and I don't want to say the artists are compromising themselves, but I think that it limits the inspiration because now you're looking at it almost like punching into a job where you're like, all right, I got to come up with 2 more because that's what I have to do.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of all goes hand in hand where I think it is art. I think the things you go through inspire what comes out of you. But I think to put a time frame on it of, okay, in Q1 of next year, we need you to go to the studio, put out 10 songs, record them, and we want it done and ready to go by Q4, because then we have tours that we want to announce and we want to put it out in this time frame because such and such other artists aren't going to compete with you. So it's going to make your chart, debut better. And then that'll get you on better tours. And it's the whole process that I don't think a lot of people discuss and talk about, but it really is, I think, kind of the detriment to the detriment of fans and bands alike.
Right. It's the part of taking what we do, and there's people that, thrive off making it a business, almost like the artist is like a trading card. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It gets wild, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, that's why. I mean, even going back to what you were saying about how things used to be. Uh, I mean, unless you were, one of these artists that had, multiple songs charting off your record. For the most part, I think growing up, it would be, and I'm not saying this was every artist, but there were several artists. It was like, okay, like there's 1 or 2 songs that I know off that record, mainly because it would be on the radio and we listened to the radio when I was a kid. Um, but yeah, it's the same way now with people dropping singles and things like that, and it gets those songs more notice. And it's a daunting task as well to come up with all these songs. It really is, and then you got people bringing in, writers from everywhere, paying people to write their songs, just so they can, tour off of it, which I'm all for collaboration. But there's a lot of people out here that, I don't know, not to put anyone down for what they do with their lives and how they want to do it, but because even my favorite artists growing up, I'm sure that there's a million different writers on that stuff. Uh, but I feel like a lot of artists out here aren't doing like original material, and part of that could be because of how hard it is to spit out record after record, and especially like you're touring throughout the year and you're expected to come home after a year of touring and go straight into the studio. um, it's kind of bonkers. It's kind of nuts. uh, but yeah, that's time is a crazy thing in itself, but whenever it's you don't have a second to breathe because you're either gone or in the studio. uh, it's hard to come up with the words for how like difficult that is sometimes. um, I don't know. I agree with you though. I think that it would be better if people weren't on such a time frame, and and had time for to let the music just hit them, let the art hit them, and when it does, it does. Uh, but it's made me look at life a little differently, and I've had this conversation with a lot of different songwriters. What helps them getting inspired to write music and things like that. And I watch a lot of documentaries. Honestly, I come home from tour and my dad has a lot of them saved. Uh, so it's like older bands that I grew up listening to with him. Um, but Stevie Nicks, I heard her say something one time, and it kind of started a whole new outlook on my life, where she's constantly paying attention to um, conversation, what could pop up in a conversation that could start a song, or uh, a billboard, a shirt, and anything with words on it. It could always start something, and just from seeing like a little phrase, it could make you feel something, that because it's not like every day, um, that there's not things happening that could inspire a song. It's just a lot of times you're not paying attention to it. So it's good to do. My notes are just full with complete nonsense of something I'll see on a shirt, or something I'll hear somebody say out in public. Uh, I can't say that. I want to say it just for shits and giggles. Did I was talking to my friend Morrow on the phone the other day, and he was talking about how he had just left a mosque, and how he was headed to his girl's place, and he said I just got my prayers and I'm on my way to get my kisses, and and I was like, dude, that's a country song if I've ever heard one. Just prayers and kisses. And so it's like, it's little things like that you constantly have to be uh, just listening for, I guess, because you never know what could start something. And I think any artist on any kind of level um, would benefit from that. Just making a quick note of something.
It's funny you say that because I have like random notes like that too, and there's one that I've never used, but it's something I've kept, and in like the most funny parallel to obviously Slipknot's line of "You Can't See California Without Marlon Brando's Eyes," like being uttered from a bum that said that or was shouting it or whatever, and Corey was like, "That's interesting." I was walking, I think actually to a show or something, and I had a bum that was like, "We're cutting the city to pieces with our feet," and I was like, and I just
Oh,
kind of like looked at him, and I was like, I go, "What did you say?" And he was like, we're cutting the city to pieces with our feet."
that's
And I
heavy.
remember, and I just remember like looking at him for a minute, and I like jotted it down, and I was like, man, that's such an interesting like thing. You could take it to mean a lot of different things.
Yeah,
We're destroying everything around us, kind of like when you walk in like sand or whatever, you end up digging a groove. So like I kind of at different times when I've looked at that line, I've been like, oh, if we just keep walking around aimlessly, we're going to dig ourselves into a rut that we can't get out of. But
right.
then I've also looked at it by of taking it to being like, you should be more exploratory in your life, because if you don't, then death is, or being complacent is kind of like how you get stagnant in life
Mhm.
too, because you don't move and you don't explore and you don't grow. So at times when I look at that thing I jotted down that a homeless person said, I take completely different meaning from it, and it's
And
all
that's what's
interesting.
cool about the writer versus the listener as well. Because if you wrote that down and somebody just read it, or you put it in a song and somebody heard it, it can mean a million different things. I think that's
Yeah.
really cool.
So it's one of those things where I constantly jot down interesting phrases or interesting ideas that pop into my head, and a lot of times they never will be anything at all, but they're just kind of mine, and they make me think, and it engages my brain in different ways. And it's interesting how words can do that, where you can read the same thing over and over and over again, almost to where it becomes a mantra of sorts.
Sure.
And what becomes interesting about it is, either depending on where you are in your life, you can look at that word or that phrase and it becomes takes on a whole new meaning that you've never thought about. But adversely, I've had where when I was a kid, I remember like I would latch onto a word and I would just repeat it in my head, and then it'd be so broken down to nothing that I'm like, how did this word come about? How did the first person who used this use it? How was it received? How did it become this thing which now has like so many different connotations of this one word? You know, like shit, for instance. Say that word over and over, it just kind of loses its like oomph, kind of. But it's like, so like, can you imagine the first person who's like shit, and they're like, what? And they're like, oh, just this thing happened, and I don't know shit. And you're like, okay, but then like stepped in shit, and you're like shit, and you're like, oh, what happened? Oh, shit's this now. It's like, it's just, it's weird to like break words. It's weird to break down words to almost this nothingness, and to like then build them back up of how did they exist and how did we come to learn to use these. And to me, I find it fascinating. And so like, it's one of the things that is kind of a bum out that I don't reread books, because I don't know if I would take something different away, because I would start triggering, oh yeah, this is where this starts happening, and then this is where this happens, that I'm not maybe allowing myself the possibility to have a new outcome of rereading the same thing and going on a different journey with something I already know.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from people, like or that rereading things, sometimes you get a whole different perspective than what you saw the first time. And it's a lot of, I get that with music sometimes too. Like a song that might have meant something totally different to me when I was younger will hit different, older. It's like it's almost like a message hitting you when you need it.
Mm.
Like you might not have been ready to perceive it the way you did now when you were younger. You know what I mean? But the power of words are so incredible, and dude, it's interesting too. Like you were talking about the basically just hearing some, or what did your friend say? Our feet are cutting the city in two. Is that what you
No,
said?
yeah, it was we're cutting. How did it go? They're cutting the city. I just forgot entirely. But yeah, they're cutting the city to pieces or something like that, or cutting the city beneath. Yeah, whatever I said, I forgot it because I don't have it right in front of me.
I understand. I saw the coolest one of those, and I've never found one this cool. I don't think to go with a song. But my friend Matt, um, we were standing outside in Richmond, outside this little club called the Canal Club, and there was like a little quote on the wall that somebody had written with a Sharpie, and it just says, "None of us are getting out." And he was like, "Well, that's the name of my next record." And he's he's just like planning everything around that quote now. And I don't know. I think that's so cool, man. But even just dude, I don't know. To be so dumb, I really like words.
Yeah, I mean,
I was never like a very good in at, I don't know, an English class or writing and stuff like that. But I would always be writing stuff like on my own. Like I remember writing my first song with lyrics. I remember writing my first lyric when I was about 9, and I have no idea why. That's what the kicker is to me, is I've never been like a very I love reading lyrics. I love listening to songs and stuff like that, but I was never like a huge reader growing up. There were certain books that I really got tangled up in. Um, One specifically is Where the Red Fern Grows. I remember reading that as a kid, and that being like one of the first books that I was like, wow, this is, I can actually feel what I'm reading, you know? Um, but yeah, it's music. I think when you put the words to music, it hits differently for me. Um, and I love it when people get weird with lyrics. I love the interpretation part of lyrics. I recently, I don't. You're probably gonna think either you're gonna say who's that guy, or you've already been into this guy for a while. But I recently just got into Father John Misty, and his lyrics have been just so cool to me recently. Um, the way he tells a story is just so unique, and I think that's a good sign of a good writer is when you, because there's so many people that can tell the story the same way, but I don't know, when you go through different holes and tunnels to tell some like a story that's been told a million times, and you're able to tell it a certain way and make people think. I love that about writing and poetry and all that stuff. That's I'm sure there's a lot of musicians that, or I know I've talked to several people that feel the same way. But I feel like that's my goal as a songwriter is just to get better at storytelling. Because all the music I listened to growing up, they were so good at it. Just putting you in the moment. You could picture where you are in the song. You could smell whatever's going on. Just picture everything. So, and maybe that's the thing about music is uh, it allows your imagination to take over. Same with books and things like that. But it was I had a crazy imagination growing up as a kid, and I think that whenever I would listen to music, like I would picture things and almost go on like a little journey in my mind while listening to it. And it's still I'm still that same kid. Um, the older I get, I think that I'm just like I think that I'm still like that kid. I'm just older now, if that makes sense. I think that my inner child is still like very present, and it's my favorite thing about talking to people a lot of times is just because I know, like, even with you, like, I know you have an inner child just right there, you know.
Clearly on
Um,
display around me.
that's I don't know, man. I think that everybody's like that, and I've tried to use it to get better at talking with people because I'm very introverted growing up. Um, I love to talk, but I'm also scared to talk. If that makes sense, I'm very like I have a tug of war in myself constantly, but it helps me to imagine like my inner child is just talking to yours. If that makes any sense at all.
No, it does. I think it's I think it's twofold. I would say that there's most musicians are, I would say most creative people that go into something in a creative space are more to the point putting themselves out there. I would say it's because they were always imaginative and saw things differently than most, and that's probably what gravitates people toward them, whatever that audience of theirs looks like. But I think it's also maybe we that was fostered in us to allow, like, that we were allowed to be creative and imaginative, and that it wasn't taken away from us by a lot of the outside situations that can happen to people. Like
Right.
having to grow up and deal with real life very quickly probably will make you have to stop being that way, because it's not conducive for survival at that point, I guess, for lack of a better term, yours or whatever. But I think it would be, I think most people, I mean, even going back to talking about Taylor and Dave, I mean, listening to either them in any of the interviews and reading Dave's book, you can still get this sense of wonderment in everything.
Mhm.
Like, like when you get to go do something as a kid and you're excited that you finally get to do this thing. It's been on my calendar, and how many days till I get to do blank. And I think it's that youth like excitement about new experiences and just getting to do things that you're excited about. I think we're often now we're afraid to say these things out loud, you know, to be excited about something or to whatever. And without hopping on a soapbox of sorts, it's like, I think social media is kind of really fucking taking that away from us. Because if you're excited about something, what's the first thing someone's going to say? Oh, this sucks. Or why are you excited about that? That's lame. And like, so it tampers down a lot of wanting to be outwardly excited about something because you're afraid of the judgment of that.
Because you see like everybody else's timeline and all the cool shit that they're, you know, posting, and comparing is so dangerous, dude. And I find myself doing it often. And whether that's, you know, I take responsibility completely for it, but it's actually it's sports, dude. They put me in sports when I was a kid, and that's what makes me compare everything.
Oh, I'm super competitive because of sports. But like, I'm weirdly competitive. Like, I played sports growing up, but like even now, like I took a job recently in the last like month or so, taking over the general manager store of a hat company. I don't necessarily want to say their name in case anyone ever listens and they're like, we don't really think that you talking about us directly and some of the things you talk about. So I've learned to be very cautious on those kind of fronts. But it's a thing where coming in, like, my store is new. It's not even been around a year, so they don't really know what it can do. But like, I'm super competitive numbers wise. So like when I see certain metrics, I'm like, oh man, I'm crushing this. I'm crushing this. Like I'm setting these goals. Like nothing is better or worse to me. Like we have a thing where it shows all the metrics and like it's, you know, a stoplight system, like red, green, yellow. So when I see all my shit in the green and I'm like, yup, killing it. And then especially when it tells me like how much I'm killing it, like, oh, you're 130% over this thing. And I'm like, yup. But then like I'll just be competitive with myself and with other things. And it's fun. Like I'm not like being a dick to anyone about anything.
No.
And like but I also get really down. Like when like yesterday, like I was having a really good day. Like on all the things, like I was like, I want to be like as close to perfect as I can be today. It's like my one shift where I work an open and close double. So everything is on me.
Mm-hmm.
And was just killing it out the game. And then I got hit with just a fuckload of returns. And so I was like,
I hate return.
Like I had one where like I'm doing a custom on a person's hat and they were like, all right. And I didn't even get to it because I was working on another one. So like putting something on someone's hat that didn't exist. And the person 2 minutes later after I had the sale, I'm like, oh man, like I'm just off to a good start. Like I'm already one away from what I did all day yesterday with somebody else helping, like working with me. And so it was a thing where I was like really feeling myself. And then the person came back like 2 minutes later and they're like, oh, well, we found the hat we really wanted next door. And so I want a refund because we're just going to do our shit over there. And I was like, oh. And then like 2 seconds later, like I got a return of like a jersey. And then I was pissed because I'm like, fuck, it's like $130 that I just like lost off my sales today. Like just like shit like that, where it's like, it had nothing to do with me, but I was taking it personally. And then like I was training someone yesterday and they came in, they're like, you look really defeated. And I was like, oh, I mean, I was having a really good day. And then like my shit's like kind of like getting stunk right now. Like just like it sucks. And they were like, we still got time. Like we can turn it around. And I'm like, yeah, but it just still just sucks. And like I just was like having a little pity party for a hot minute. And then they were like, well, fucking let's turn it around. And I'm like, all right. But like it's interesting how like that can be infectious too. And like the same thing, like I came in goal oriented and really wanted to kill it, and I was, and then I let a couple setbacks like get to me, and it wasn't until someone came in and they were like, it's kind of the nice thing I think sometimes to parlay it into bands. I think sometimes when people get really upset about a person leaving a band, as I get older, I think about it more from the perspective of it's fresh blood. So instead of someone who's been like, it's another tour, the whole cycle repeats itself and rinse, wash, repeat. You get someone who's excited about everything because it's new to them, and then it reinvigorates you, and then you're like, it's infectious, and you're like, yeah, fuck it, we get to play here, right? We get to do this, and like everyone's excited about these things again. And I think sometimes you need that in your life, where, again, kind of going back to like you were saying, I think some people get tamped out because, or get the excitement or get these things flamed, like their flames taken away by other people and other things, because all they see are the expectations or whatever that comes with those things, not just being excited about themselves, like doing well. It's like, I was doing well and I did do well. We did well. We had a good
And
day.
failures are bound to happen on your way to greatness, you know?
Yeah.
But it is crazy, like how just like one small, if you want to call it a failure, one small fail, uh, if you're wearing it on you, um, how that energy can affect people around you. I know, like, I'm really hard on myself, the same exact way you're talking about, playing shows, and I try to go into, every night thinking like, okay, like I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna play this song, the best of these songs. We on the last tour we were playing for 55 minutes a night, and so that's a couple of songs, you know what I mean? And it's really hard to play, hard, and play like those types of fills and everything. I started losing the sense of like just letting go and letting things flow and things like that. Because if I would get caught up on one little drum fill or something like that, like there would be something that would happen, and I would feel it, and
Yeah.
and it would bum me out, and I'm sitting here trying to go into like this next part of the song, but my mind is still back there. So it's like I can't even focus on how as a band we're killing it in the moment, because my mind is still focused on the failure. And I think that it's okay to feel those things. Obviously, like it's okay to feel, how you need to feel, but it's just like when you have negative thoughts like enter your head throughout the day, thoughts are constantly coming at us, but it's our choice like which ones we hold on to. And that why is it that the negative ones are so easy to linger, like to just try to take over your whole night? Because I've definitely had shows where I'll let one mess up out of 55 minutes. I'll let it control if I called that set good or bad. But the thing is like I had a friend tell me this, like how, I think it was Ali. I don't know, you can compare any of the top athletes with the same metaphor, but basically just saying like how they were known as like the greatest in the world, but they still lost. Like they still like failed. It's just part of being a human. Um, but no, I know exactly what you mean, and I've definitely let days, like that control me. But it makes me so thankful for the friends that I have in my life that come by and pick my chin up, and they're just like, dude, like, just you got to let that go, man. You got to let it go. Um, I'm so grateful for the people that I've crossed paths with through the years. And I don't know, because I think if it was just me, I would be doomed, just the way my brain works. I'd be like, dude, I remember the first time, I ever messed up in a live setting, and I was so bummed, dude. I mean, I was probably 15 or 16. Um, but I remember thinking like I never want to feel that again. I never want to. But the thing is that's part of life, especially adult life. It's part of failure. Is just like, I don't know, the people that say like failure is not an option. Like, just stay at the house, dude, because like it's gonna happen. It's how you carry yourself forward. Um, and and knowing that deep down, like how we react to those setbacks, like how we're gonna affect the people around us. And I don't know. You talked at the beginning of this, like you were talking about empathy, and um, that's one thing that I really like would like to carry on, like, or carry forward, like thinking about is, okay, if I care so much about people, then whenever I go through these little moments, um, where I feel negatively affected because of like how I performed, then I really need to snap out of it, because it's gonna negatively affect the people around me, you know, and potentially make them have little setbacks along the way, but just because of like my attitude, or my negative energy. Um, it's definitely hard to be positive all the time. I'm not saying like anybody is, but it's definitely cool to have like in the back of your head, like how it could not only affect us but the people around us. You know.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things is that I think I'll speak for myself. I think the reason why I get so hard on myself at times is because I have a high expectation of what I want to do
Mm.
and the goals and so forth that I'll put in front of myself. But secondly, I feel like because almost anything we do is there's usually somebody that we're answering to, whether it be a boss or whatever, and you don't want to let them down, and you feel like
Right.
making a mistake makes them look bad in conjunction, like you backed me, or like whatever, and I made a mistake and it makes us all look bad, and so therefore you're taking accountability. But the other thing too is I've kind of been trying to learn drums for the second time in my life.
Let's go, baby.
It's a thing where I feel like a lot of times when I'm like I'm somebody, like when I'm drums are one of those few instruments like where when I hear it, it's like, okay, I'm pretty sure it's this. Like it's one of the few
Mm.
instruments where you can kind of hear it if you have that, I guess, that kind of brain for it, where it's like, okay, like if this part's coming, that's a snare and probably this tom, or when it does like this, it's probably one of these times. Here's the kick, here's China, crash, whatever. You can kind of start picking it apart, so you can kind of figure it out from there, where it's like, okay, like great example, like so like my hero, like it's only going to be a few things that can make that beat. Then it's a matter of staying in time with it, and then kind of feeling where the fills are coming, where this part's coming, whatever. So I feel like when you make a mistake in drums, it's when you're thinking too rudimentarily. Like I know when trying to practice, like watching drum lessons, and it's like, okay, here's right, left, fill, and it's like you could either start like right, or I should say right, left, right, cymbal with the other hand, and you're kind of doing those. I feel like when I'm trying to do those, I'm like, oh my god, this is like fucking math, and like I'm getting it wrong, and da 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 da. But it's when trying to just figure out a song and listening to it, and it's more about feel. I feel like I'm playing better because it's like, okay, yeah, this is muscle memory. It's just repetition, and it's doing these, and it feels right. And I feel like I play better when I'm doing that. Granted, I'm sure I'm not. But again, it's just repetition. And then once you kind of get that autopilot mode where it's like, okay, here's how this song goes, and it's this part, and then, okay, here comes this, and your body just kind of instinctively starts playing and going. And you're like, oh, that drums are kind of, and I guess music as a whole, but more so drums, because you're kind of in all of it, that it's a feel. And that when you start thinking, that's when you start messing up.
That's my problem, man. Is I'll start thinking, or there will be. I'd love to not improv the whole way through our set, because like if I had spent time on a drum fill that I like, and it's part of, it's a main voice in the song, like I'll try to keep it in there, of course, but I like to add things here or there, or even take away, like just to add a breath where there wasn't one before. Um, but I start like it's when I start thinking, like even something as simple as like okay, I found a more efficient way of playing something, like focusing in on like little intricacies of like form or technique, and being like, okay, like I'm gonna try that tonight, and because it's not I'm taking myself out of the muscle memory game, you know what I mean, and trying something new, you know, or leading with the left instead of the right for a certain feel. um, I think a lot of it too. It's so strange. Like I'm trying to come up with a good warm up routine before shows, because I've had nights where I warm up too long before the set, because I have like this little kick pad and like a DW like practice stand kit. Um, I've had nights where I warm up too long, where I'm just like, I think I'm thinking too much at that point. But I've also had nights, or I felt great some nights doing that. But then there's also been nights where I don't warm up at all, and I feel completely fine. I feel better than I did when I warmed up. You know, um, I don't, dude. It comes down. The thing is that you can get so nerdy with it. Like even down to like your diet, and like how long ago. I don't know, like taking a shit right before you play or something like that. Like it, and how that can be like a bad thing. There is a cat at my door just scratching glass. So hold on. So yeah, it's there's so many different things that go into it. I've been trying to experiment though, like to see what feels the best. I even and sometimes it's down to like, even I think trying things that I've always been afraid to try. Um, like even down to like we played Berkeley um, on this last tour, and I found myself trying to play in cowboy boots for the first time, because I've practiced and done it a few times, but I was just like, tonight's the night that I play in boots, and playing double bass and boots is I thought it was going to be a lot harder. Surprisingly, I got through it just fine.
I feel like the thing for me, like, because it's like I love rock, I love metal, and all that stuff, and the kit I have is like a Roland electronic kit. So I
didn't
spend the extra money to get an extra kick pedal, so I could do double bass. And then same with cymbals. I was like, gosh, in hindsight, I was like, I should have opted to get more cymbals, which I can always add. But it's a thing where I'm having way more fun recently jamming to like hip hop stuff and like R&B, like Aaliyah Try Again, or like More Than a Woman, or like a lot of stuff by Timbaland. Really, it's just like it's so fun to play, and like I realize like it's really setting the foundation, because it's just the same tempo, it's same beat over and over and over and over and over and over again, with little like chorus is really the only change that's happening. And so it's really kind of been an interesting thing where it's like, okay, here's just repetition, and it's essentially snare, hi-hat, kick over and over and over and over and over again. The nice thing is like we on the thing, like you have different kits that you can have. So it's like usually I'll use like the 808 setting that they have on it. So it's like the kick drum has like that deep like hit to it, and the snare is like really poppy and electronic sounding. The like hi-hats are kind of the same thing, like the artificial sounding, because that's what it is. And it's one of those that like, and it's really just fun kind of locking into a groove where you're just like, all right, this is all this is. This, and it's like once you kind of figure it out, then it's like now on someone like this, like a Try Again, like that kick drum, it's like a lot of times when it kicks into that like part, I guess I'll call it the bridge, where I found a YouTube version where there's no vocals, it's just the instrumental. And so, like, when you really start picking apart some of it, like that part where it's like, and then it kicks back in the, like man, like I just am like, it'd be so fucking fun to play this live, because then you could just be like almost like a breakdown on that where you're just like and then kicking into it. That it's like I'm just beating the shit out of it, and my wife will be like, "Whatever you're doing, I thought it was you were washing shoes in the dryer," because it just sounded like tumbling whatever. Because it's just like in my headphones, I hear the drums in the song. Outwardly, all you hear is plastic, 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 plastic. So it's funny to just do that, but it's I've been having a lot of fun, kind of learning an instrument I've always loved, and just, I mean, it's noisy, so it's hard to play, and it annoys people when you're trying to learn. And I'm one of those people that, I always learned when you make a mistake something, you start all over and do it again. So it's like when I make a mistake in something, I'm like, fuck, all right, here we go, back to this part.
Yeah.
And start it all over. And then again, it's hard not to get in your head where it's like, okay, this part I keep fucking up's coming up. But when you finally get it, you're like, okay. And then you fuck up something else.
That's the worst. That's the worst. When there's something that, like a part of a song, especially live, where you might have messed up the night before or something, and you feel it. It's the next night, and you're like, "Oh man, this is that part. This is the part that that slapped me in the face last night." You know what I mean? But dude, it sucks that drums like. I mean, it's different with the rolling, right? Because you can turn it down. But dude, live, I don't know, like touring as a drummer, I'm very envious of like these bands that have like jam rooms and can go in there and just play whenever they want. And I've been to a few, like um, Barry from Shinedown. Like I've got to jam on his little kit that they have. They have like a little room set to the side where they can go in and just jam and warm up and everything. But it's definitely not like that on like a Gideon tour. And so whenever it's time to warm up, I don't know. You would think like sound check's the best place for it. Like, okay, you have like this feel that I've had stuck in my head all day long that I just want to get it out. I just want to see like what it sounds like. And so like I'll sit down, they'll mic the kit up and everything, and I'll start to noodle around. And meanwhile, like I have my in-ears in, and I can hear everything the guitar and the bass player's playing, but nobody else can hear them because we're on ears. So I'm hearing everything they're playing. But as soon as the drummer starts playing, everyone's like turns around like, dude, stop. And dude, I hate it so much. It's like the one instrument that you just can't jam whenever. So I brought my acoustic guitar on this last run just to try to get better at that. And I got a few pointers because I mean, getting better at drums on tour. I've learned so much from different drummers over the years. So I was like, okay, if I want to get better at guitar, what better place? I mean, there's guitar players everywhere, and so I'm actually doing what you're doing with a different instrument. I'm going back and trying to relearn something that I played when I was younger, and I'm trying to get better at guitar and everything. But there's all the techniques and everything behind guitar it gets so crazy. But I just love it, man. That was my first love. When I was a little kid, I would put my ear down on. My dad had this Washburn acoustic guitar, and I would sit in his lap and put my ear to the body of it, and I think that was like the first time it was like ecstasy. You know what I mean? It's like just hearing those chords strummed and like hearing the vibrations of everything. And I still do that to this day. Like I'll come home from a long tour and just pick up my acoustic guitar and just lay my ear on the side of that thing. And dude, it's just so soothing. It's completely opposite from drums. So it's a nice little break from everything.
Yeah, I think that's been I think one of the hardest parts for me is, again, I guess it's imposter syndrome to a degree. But like, it's funny. So the tour you just finished, Damon, that is playing guitar for the Fallen Dreams, is like a good friend.
I love Damon.
lives like an hour away from me. So it's a thing where I'm surrounded by so many people who are like really fucking good. Mm-hmm. And they're like people I've known for a long time. And sometimes being in rooms with these people is like just daunting. Like I don't even want to play an instrument in front of them because I'm like, you're really good at this. And I'm like mediocre at best. But what's interesting is like I've learned in like playing around other people. You know, sometimes people come over here and they'll play guitar or play what I have. And it's interesting because like they'll be playing something. I'm like, God, I wish I could play like that. Like the way you're able to like finger pick or the way you're able to like shift from these chords to these chords. Like I wish I could play like that. And then I'm just like kind of caveman, like just fucking right hand dominant. And then they're like, man, I wish I had a right hand like that. And I'm like, really? Right. I don't think this is anything. Like anyone can fucking do this. Like you have more finesse and skill. And it just comes down to, and a lot of times I feel like you can apply it to anything. Like everyone wants what they don't have, what they're not good at. But
and
someone always inevitably
so
wants.
Hard on yourself.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, you know, like I see people like, you know, oh, I wish I had long hair. I wish I had short hair. I wish I had gray hair. I wish I had blonde hair. Which like everyone always wants what they don't have. And so it's funny, like when I do that, things like that, I'm like, oh, you know, sometimes it's like, I don't have any of these grandiose ideas that I'm going to be in a band and I'm going to like ever do anything where I play live. Like I did that for a little bit and it was fun, but I'm just, again, I think it was kind of the circumstances of like the people I played with. I didn't take it as seriously as I wanted. They were at different points in their lives. Like they were at the end of their college career. I was actually playing. I was like in a real like job. Uh-huh. And I remember like having to postpone my job for a city at the time to go on like a week and a half tour, and it was garbage, the whole thing. And like it was an experience, and I like enjoyed it, and I have like fun memories. Like I was talking to a friend that was here on tour the other day when we were at dinner, and we just kind of shared like random like shitty stories. But it's funny because even going back to when I was booking shows, a friend of mine now is the drummer in Train. And we were talking about the shit tour I booked for them when they came from New York. And he was like, I was like, dude, I felt so bad for you guys because I thought you were like used to like touring or playing shows at a certain level, and we're just kind of eating shit on this whole like week run. And he was like, dude, he goes, I look back on that tour so fondly because like shortly after that, like I basically had been a studio drummer, so I never really toured. And wow. He goes, now I'm touring with like bands like Grace Potter, and I'm touring with Train, and like we're playing, you know, sheds and tour buses and all that. He goes, so when talking to some of these other guys and talking and sharing experiences about like, oh man, remember when we like had to like sleep in a fucking Walmart on a day off because the show got canceled? He was like,
dude, that's part of the good storytelling, man.
And that's like, what he said. He goes, like, you're looking at it like you felt bad for us, like you did did wrong by us. And he goes, like, now that I'm where I am, I get to appreciate where I am because of those things, like getting to play your basement at the end of the tour. Like that's still the only house show I've ever done. But it's an experience where I get to
house shows. Holy shit, I miss house shows. Dude, we caved a kid's floor in one time. And I don't think his parents were home. That was, dude, but house shows used to be, dude, there were people jumping off like this dining room table, like basically to like crowd surf over the people like in this room. Dude, I miss shows like that. But dude, I don't know. We talk about the eating shit stories all the time, man. Like I feel like every tour I'm sure if you just sat with us for a, you know, one tour, you would hear like a million stories be repeated. One we constantly look back to is this was probably 2000, I would say 11 or 12 somewhere. No, it would have been 11. So we were two bands and one band. Two bands, one 15-passenger van. So we had to have places to stay because we couldn't sleep in the van.
Right.
But we couldn't afford hotels every night. I don't think we could afford hotels at all at that point. And so we hit up one of us got on Facebook and just posted from the band like, hey, if you live in this area and you can house 2 bands, please let us know. We would greatly appreciate it. So this kid hits us up, and he's like, I got a place, and this is somewhere in North California. He's like, I got a place for you guys to stay. Here's my address. And so we show up and we get out of the van and we're like, oh, this house is really nice. Like this is cool, you know? And he takes us like he's leading us and leads us right past the house. And we're like, well, where the hell are we staying? He takes us to this garage and opens the door. Dirt floors, dude. Not even dirt floors. There's a blood-stained handprint on the door inside the garage, like leading to this other room. Just straight out of a horror movie, dude. Not even a door to this garage. It was they had a mattress. So that was the thing we looking back to it was so ironic because it was okay. So we're sleeping on the dirt and there's no mattress, but there was a mattress. It was just being used as a door uh, to basically keep the wind out of this place. But dude, there's so many times like that. Like I don't know. I look back to it, man, and I'm just like, how in the hell are we still here? I remember eating ramen noodles, like dry ramen noodles, going down the road, like just crunching them up and pouring the seasoning in there and shaking it up and eating them like chips. Um, dude, we just did it because we didn't want to live any other kind of life, and oh man, we used to have van wars where we would like put ravioli and piss in like a cup and throw it at the other van going down the road. Um, those got out of hand a few times. But dude, I look back to all of those. I remember the first time I made just $5. I remember the band saying, you know, like this tour we can afford to give everybody $5 a day, and I mean, I just remember being mind blown, like, oh my god, like we're doing it, like this is progression, you know, and and I mean, we would go home and work as hard as we could, and basically save up all the money that we made while we were home to either put in the gas tank on tour or eat while we were gone. Um, and I'm thankful for I basically worked at this heavy duty truck store for a long time called Long Lewis Sterling Western Star Heavy Duty Trucks. That's what it was called, dude. But Bobby Jewell was my boss's name, and
What a name.
yeah, he was a very nice guy. I remember being terrified that I was going to lose my job because I kept touring, and I would come and I would apologize to him for leaving so much, and he said nobody can tell you uh, when you're done being a musician other than yourself. He had a son that was a musician, and so he had like a soft spot in his heart for it. And he said you need to follow this dream as long as you possibly can, and try to see it out, or you'll always ask what if. And dude, he ended up passing away a few years ago, and I don't. I'm so grateful for the time I spent with him, and just like how he blessed me in that way, like being able to come home and work a job. And if you go back to like the early Gideon records, like you can see where I would put Bobby Jewell in my thanks. Because I would come back to work and be like, look, I put you in the album.
I gotta start wrapping this up. I feel like I could talk to you forever.
That's how I
just
feel
about,
as well, man.
Yeah, I sent you a DM of the show, one of the last shows I had at my house, just to kind of show like my house getting destroyed in real time.
Oh shit.
But it was way back in the day when Expire were doing like their second to last tour, and they went back and did house shows, and so we had like 100 and I think what was it, 145 paid people plus the bands plus some random people that I had come to our house. And just shit got destroyed. It was fucking blast. First time
But
I've
yeah, you
ever.
had Expire at your house, brother.
I mean, at this point, I've
That's
had.
like inviting a tornado.
Yeah, it was a good time. I haven't done a house show in a while. I always joke because I also house bands too when they're on tour. And a lot of times they'll see the basement. They're like, "Oh fuck, man, we should cancel the show and bring it here." But it's a thing where like I've talked about over the years on the show of just like falling in love with music in different capacities. Whether it's falling in love with music again recently, because I felt like this made it a job. So I had to listen to records where I was like, what am I going to talk about? And then I kind of got away from that and just started having conversations with people. And I think that that's way more rewarding, especially if you're a fan of a band. You get to know more about, your favorite band. Right. But kind of in closing, I wanted to say thank you for the time and just kind of being vulnerable throughout the chat and revealing a lot about yourself and things you're going through. But also, when I got got the email with the album in it probably about a month ago, it was one of those things like it's hard not to go online and just be like, oh my god, this record's so fucking good, because I also don't want to invite people to try to start hacking my email.
You do like this thing?
Yeah, I remember saying, actually the band retweeted it. I was like, this new Gideon record is fucking tough. Like I was walking.
I remember seeing that, and we were all like, "Oh no, it leaked," because we didn't know. Like, I think that was you. It could have been somebody else, but we were kind of scared for a minute. Not that it even matters, but
no, but that was me, and I was like, this record is so fucking good. Because I think, like, in this day and age, we have too often people build up something and then it becomes this thing where it's like there's no way it can live up to the hype. And I know from the last record to this one, I was excited to see where the band's growth was going to go. And, obviously seeing you guys, I think it was, I forget who you were touring with. You were playing Elevation here in Grand Rapids. And I think I feel like you were either saying you were starting to write something or here's a new song, but like the album wasn't announced or anything. So I think you were
was
just
it last May?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that was I'm trying to remember how is Elevation.
That's the downstairs. It's almost like a Chicago style venue. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That's that was with Wage War and Wash You Sleep.
That's right.
But yeah, it was fun playing More Power, More Pain on that tour because we just got to see like who kind of liked it and how it was going to go live. It's interesting to see how a song goes over live before you release the recording, mm-hmm. So you can see how people react to the energy of the song.
Yep.
And I wish we could do that with every single one of them, honestly.
But it was a thing where I remember being like, shit, all right, like if this is where you're going. But I was like, maybe this isn't how the whole record is going to sound. I don't know. So like when I got it and I just sat with it, like I was walking my dog. I was like, I woke up, got the email, and I was like, all right, fuck it. I'm going to go walk my dog for like 25 minutes or so. And I put it on. I was just like, fuck. And then like the next song coming, I'm like, Jesus. And then I was just like, this thing is like a fucking ass beater from start to finish. I was like, I don't know if people are going to be ready for this. So then that's when I put out that tweet. I was like, because I put it from my personal account. So then that way people were like, oh, whatever. And I was just like, new Gideon is fucking tough. And I put that like emoji.
Yeah,
and it was a thing where, I love, saying to people in real time when I have them on, like, what the album, like that is good. And I love it. And it's a really great record. And I'm as stupid as it is, because my opinion doesn't mean shit, but it's like, I'm proud of you guys because I can tell that you guys put a lot into this, and I feel very like that's the only word that kept coming to me when I kept listening. So I was like, man, I'm really proud of these guys. Like, I feel like not saying that you haven't put out a record that you are like put your all into, but it's like there's an obvious growth from this one to the last one where I'm just like, this, like, proud is the only word that keeps coming to my mind. So it's like I'm proud of you guys for what you were able to accomplish and put on record. And from talking to Damon and Chad and the rest of the guys and for the Fallen Dreams, it's like, and some of the friends that I know across the country that saw this tour, it's like this tour was a huge fucking success from everything that I've heard. And it's one of those. Yeah. So to me, it's one of those where it's like, I feel like this is kind of like your moment for you guys to really kind of break out and achieve that next step that I think a lot of people have seen that is going to happen for you. So as a fan, and now as someone that's kind of gotten to talk to you on a more personal level, very excited to see what this record does for you, and that everyone gets to hear it and kind of see the successes that I think are on the horizon for you guys.
I appreciate you saying that. And obviously, I obviously hope things continue to progress. You know what I mean? But I do have to stop and just say that I'm so grateful uh, for my journey this far, and for the people in my band, because we started out as friends, and now I've spent more time with them than my actual family, and I consider those people my family. Um, just an extension, and I don't know. I'm just so grateful for everything that's, and all the people I've talking to you, talking to the guys you mentioned for the Fallen Dreams, dude. That band started so much for me when I was coming up in this. Dude, if it all ended tomorrow, you know what I mean? Like, hopefully it doesn't, but if it did, like, it's been one hell of a ride, and I just, like, I don't want it to ever end. I really don't. So I just, thank you for saying that about the record. We did work our asses off for it, but it was also about feeling a lot that was going on, because we sat on that record for 2 years, um, just waiting for the right time to put it out, and a lot of things that happened that we wrote about on that record. It's real things that I was going through, and real things that my brothers were going through, and um, I don't know. I lost a really good friend the day I got to the studio. I found out my friend Sam passed away, and I had hung out with him a week before I was to the day when we got to the studio. So the song "I Will Carry You" is in memory of my friend Sam Hutchins, and I still can't listen to that song, man, like without bawling my eyes out, because I miss him, dude. But I tried to write it in, like, keeping not just me and like our relationship, but friends that I have that were even closer than I was with Sam. Like, he had so many friends. He was just that kind of person that was just like a light as soon as he walks in a room. So this song, or this album, had a lot of different types of hurt, whether it was feeling angry, or feeling like motivated through anger, or just feeling like depressed, or feeling lonesome. There's just so many different things that were felt through the making of this album, and I just hope that uh, taking all of that in and putting it through songs, I hope that somebody is able to listen to it, and it help them through whatever they're going through. Because you know, pain and constant work or something that every human goes through. And I just hope that what I've felt in my life can help somebody else along their way. So, but thank you so much for even listening to it, man. Honestly, and there's so much music out there these days that you honestly could have listened to 20 seconds of each song and been like, all right, I'm good. But thank you for listening to it and taking the time, and even taking the time to talk to me today. Like, it's been great getting to talk to you, man.
Yeah.
Really been.
Yeah.
I like your
Lastly,
Doja Cat shirt, by the way.
thank you. Where can everyone find you or the band, or anything you'd like to plug online?
On Instagram, it's just at jake.smelley. The band is at Gideon AL. That's where I'm at most of these days. I'm also my TikTok is Leon Moon. And we just started a Gideon TikTok just because we kept seeing like people, like I would get tagged in Gideon stuff on there. So I was just like, let's just make one. So I think on there it's Gideon underscore.
Oop, got a phone call, I bet.
There, I shouldn't have done that. You there? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah, you're good.
I think it's Gideon underscore AL. I'm so sorry for doing that.
No worries. I have had a great time chatting with you. I say let's continue. I'm usually not the type of person to say shit like this, but I sent you a DM. Let's continue chatting off of this thing, and hopefully next time you guys are around in the area, link up and grab a beer, a coffee, something, and
I would love
continue
to.
in real person.
I love Grand Rapids, dude, and I got to shout out Dell, the security guard.
Dale, he's a good friend. Yep,
I love
he's
that
the homie.
man.
He's the homie. I'll let him know. I'll send him a message as soon as we're done with this that you got a shout out at the end of our chat.
Hell yeah.
Awesome. Enjoy the rest of your day, man.
Great talking to you. Bye, buddy.
You as well. So that was my conversation with Jake, again, drummer for Gideon. Want to thank him for taking the time, first and foremost. And as always, just, being present during this conversation and getting real. It's one of those things sometimes and if you watch the video versions of this, or you are watching the video version of this, it's interesting at times to see our mannerisms when talking and kind of getting real about something, because I'll kind of get a lot more fidgety because I feel a bit uncomfortable, kind of revealing maybe some of the things more personally about myself to a stranger that I literally have never met until right now in the time of talking to them. But then I kind of see some of their mannerisms, I think, doing the same. And it's in that where I feel a little bit of comfort, that it's like, this is awkward. This is maybe hard, but it's also the thing that's exciting about it, because you're sharing real things. The band put out their latest record, More Power, More Pain. And, like I had told Jake right at the very end, when I saw them play like in last May, almost a year ago at this point, doesn't seem like it. It was a thing where when they played this song, I was like, fuck, this song's heavy. And when I got the email with the album in it, I was just like, fuck, this album is so heavy. Like, it is unrelenting. It is, the phrase I always use for records like this, like, A, it's an ass beater. Secondly, it's all pit, no shit. Like, it's just a fucking intense record. And like I told Jake, like, at times listening to it, the word that just kept coming to me was proud. I was proud of these guys for putting out a record that you can tell they put a lot of themselves into. I didn't even know that basically the I Will Carry You was about, or I didn't obviously know that I Will Carry You held such weight that it did for Jake personally. But a lot of these things, like when people talk about metal or hardcore or things like that, and sometimes they just say it all sounds the same. I don't know. I feel like maybe they just haven't experienced, I hate to say real pain, but maybe they just haven't experienced that thing that makes them need this outlet of aggressive music, and that it helps you deal with these things. As I'm literally sitting here right now, I got a text from my mom saying that my grandfather is in the hospital. I don't know why. I don't know what happened. I know his health has been declining the last few years, as it does when you start getting into your 80s and so forth. But it was a thing where, like, when I tried calling my mom after getting the text, I'm like, what happened? Like, what's going on? And I can't get a hold of her, and I just feel frustrated, and I feel upset and angry and sad, and, all these emotions come flooding back to me. And then I start thinking of similar text messages, phone calls that I've gotten from people basically, saying that your friend's gone or that you've lost somebody. And maybe, like I said in this chat, talking to my therapist, and they said that, you're very, I don't want to say comfortable with death, but you just understand that death is a part of life and that nothing is forever. And I was reminded yesterday, just sometimes how being and going a step beyond can really impact somebody, and you don't even realize it at the time. But as I've said, I started a new job, and one of the things, the things of my job is to customize hats for people. You can put graphic or text messages, or not text messages, but texts on these hats. And it's one of those things where a lot of times, I put a lot of yesterday I was thinking about a hat where I made it for somebody, and it said R.I.P. Their friend, and they're walking around with a memorial to a friend that no longer exists. And a quick story that I'm just kind of thinking about now that's kind of hitting me really hard is so I had a gentleman come in, and he wanted a hat for his I believe it was for his father or father-in-law. I can't remember the exact designation of which part of his family it was a part of. But long and short of it, I was like, hey, do you want to customize it, make it personal for, whomever? And he was like, yeah, let's throw the last name on, it's for so-and-so, they have cancer, they're not going to make it. And they, they'll really like this. And so I ended up having my coworker do it, and it just didn't turn out great, and the guy didn't seem very stoked on it. I was told about it after the fact, so I went and grabbed another hat. I did it myself. I thought of a few different ways we could do it where maybe it wouldn't come out as bad and would be better as a whole. And so I called him and basically was like, look, I've heard what happened, and I wanted to make this right. Obviously, you paid extra money for this to go on your hat. And if it's not up to the satisfactory level of what you wanted or the quality that we expect when we give you something, I want to make this right. So I'm going to go ahead and make another hat for you. I already have it done. If you can come back, or whenever you're able to come back, I'll just do a straight exchange, no problems. So that gentleman came in yesterday while I was working with another gentleman working on some hats for him. And I handed him the hat, and he looks at me and he just goes, thank you so much for this and making this right. And then looked at the other customer and was like, this guy went above and beyond. He's a really good manager. He didn't have to do any of this stuff. He did it on his own volition. I didn't ask him to. And when I showed him the hat that I had made, he said, that's perfect. And then he shook my hand and he goes, so the guy I told you that I was getting this hat for? And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, he died this morning. And he tells me that the hat that I'm handing him is going into his coffin with him. And it's one of those things where whenever I feel like sometimes this shit doesn't fucking matter, like I'm dealing with hats and I'm dealing with the public, and however stupid it may seem, or that my job doesn't fucking matter, or even at times that this podcast doesn't matter, it's little things like that that really make me realize how profound the littlest thing can be to somebody else. And it's just one of those things where I hope people understand why these connections and these conversations and these things matter, because you just never know. I'm sad right now that potentially more death and so forth is on the horizon potentially in my life. And I hate that I'm going to probably dwell on some of these negative thoughts, but it is what it is. And so to start wrapping up this episode, if you would like to keep up with Gideon, you can find them at gideonal on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Or you can keep up with everything going on with Gideon at their Linktree. It's pretty much in the bio of all of their social media, but it's just Linktree at gideonal. If you would like to keep up with Jake, you can find him on Instagram at jake.smelley, Smelley. And if you'd like to keep up with the podcast, you can find us simple enough, Brew Speak Pod on all your major social media networks. We are on almost all major podcasting platforms. If there is a way to rate, review, or subscribe, please do such. Obviously, you know why that matters. And for the Brewtallyspeaking podcast, I am John, and I'll talk to you all next time. Enjoy the rest of your week.